Good afternoon, everybody. All right, now that we got all the good stuff out of the way, the happy stuff, we're going to make a little left turn at Albuquerque here. I'm usually never up here talking about the happy stuff. The stuff with the PD, the top cops, the things with these young people here, it's all good stuff, all very good stuff. Unfortunately, it's the same old thing in corrections. Everything old is new again at the Nassau County Correctional Facility. If you'll allow me a couple of minutes here, I just need to get some issues taken care of. 2 months ago, James Arenda was moved out as the Nassau County Sheriff. A new acting sheriff was appointed, and former Sheriff Michael Sposato, who was fired by former County Executive Laura Curran, was brought back as Correction Commissioner and given the job of running the day-to-day operations of this facility. To say that this union and our membership has been incensed with Sposato's return is about as big a huge understatement as you can get, since we have had a long, arduous, and publicly adversarial relationship with Michael Sposato. You may ask, why did we wait until now to act out? The answer is simple, since it was almost 2 months ago. We try. I try to work with what's given to us. Over the 100-year history of this department, we have changed in administrations, unfortunately, like we change our socks in this department. And sometimes to my own detriment, I try. No one can say, and I'm sure everybody on this panel cannot say, that I am not a reasonable person. But I'm done banging my head against the wall about issues we have in the Department of Corrections. That's why I'm here today, not only with my executive board, but also with my entire board of delegates, all of these people standing behind me, representing our entire membership and voicing our opposition to Michael Sposato remaining in this role, picking up where he left off over 4 years ago. Sposato's previous tenure as sheriff was marked by draconian cuts to this facility. That's one of my favorite sayings. Leaving a completely demoralized workforce while also leaving the infrastructure of this facility in such a state that our buildings are visibly decaying into the ground. Everyone here is very familiar with what I've talked about when it comes to our infrastructure. The 4 years since Sposato's departure, 4.5 years, saw minor changes with 2 interim sheriffs. And while thankfully the insanity of Mike Sposato was gone during that time, they both did little, or more likely were allowed to do little, to properly run or staff this facility. The ongoing narrative is that we can't get anything done for years in this department because there's no money. Then there was COVID. While obviously horrible, it was another convenient excuse to do nothing here but shut down. We cannot properly hire, we can't fix roofs, we can't use areas of the facility because they are condemned, on and on and on. Meanwhile, over the past few years, and God bless them, we've seen new police precincts built, a $40+ million academy built, new social services building is still being built as we speak, new buildings all around the county, departments all with new vehicles, and non-stop hiring in the police department. Non-stop. Since 2014, with the NIFA contracts that were done back then to get out of the freeze, over 1,400 new cops have been hired in Nassau County. I don't want to speak on the departures because I don't have those numbers handy, but 1,400 new cops have been hired, and they represent the bulk of the police officers in Nassau County. In corrections, we hired 295 in that same period, and we've lost 431. In numerous meetings and conversations with the county and department officials, we've been told that due to mismanagement here, we need to hire someone to manage this place. Overtime costs have skyrocketed. The only problem is that no one can give me an accurate number of what those costs are to justify the return of Mike Sposato and his ways. I've been told it's $30 million, $35 million, $40, $60 million. No one can give me an accurate number to justify further cuts to this already depleted and demoralized department. And the numbers I do get are commingled with other line items but are being counted as overtime. The actual numbers I do have are, and should be startling, although it shouldn't be startling to a lot of people because I've spoken about it enough times in this forum and several other forums. This year's budget for 2022 called for the hiring of 80 correction officers to get us to a head count of 790. 2 classes of 40 each, not taking into account attrition. Myself and representatives from the county, department, civil service conducted numerous meetings detailing a hiring protocol to get our staffing back to safe levels to adequately run this department. A new test was given, and there's still another full test available, so there are plenty of candidates in a pool that have to be gone through. But to date, we have not hired 80 or 100, as was discussed. Up until this past week, we hired 27 new recruits To date, that's for this year. To date for this year, we've lost 37, with more on tap to retire at year's end. We hired 23 last week, but those recruits are going to be in the academy until the end of January. So for the year 2022, a year that we were promised 80 to 100 new hires, we actually hired 27 and are currently negative at least 10 officers from where we started in January. I don't know what kind of management this is, but somebody needs to get a new calculator. Not to mention, once again, due to shortages that never get addressed, the new academy class is going to be working 10-hour days and several 8- and 9-hour Saturdays to get them out sooner to cut overtime costs because we don't have enough staff. This has become routine now since we're hemorrhaging staff and only hiring in what I can describe as in spurts. Now at this juncture, in this space and time, we have yet another change in jail administrations, and the answer is to rehire Mike Sposato to run the day-to-day operations of this facility. To do what, I ask? Save this place? Manage it? Rebuild it? Come on. Let's hit the reset button with the very same person who drove this facility into the ground, who demoralized this entire workforce with his condescending mission of cutting this place to ribbons with no regard for the safety of inmates or officers. Does anyone remember the Armour Correctional inmate health debacle? I'm sure everybody here does, almost all. 13 dead inmates in 5 years during his tenure, all in the name of saving money on medical care for inmates. Constant news stories of mismanagement at the jail. Demands from some of you on this very panel for his resignation. Well, with his return came an immediate return to his old ways of cutting and slashing costs in this department, a department that's already been cut to the bone and rife with mismanagement for years. A few weeks ago, county and department officials stood in front of the media at a jail at a press conference touting a raid that was conducted by the new jail administration where weapons and drugs were recovered. Our new Commissioner Sposato touted that this will not be tolerated and it's a new day in corrections, using our emergency response team as props standing behind them. That all sounds good, but I have two issues. First and foremost was the fact that those officials were standing in front of our B building, our most secure building on the grounds. And I don't know whether anybody noticed or not, but the building surrounded by razor ribbon behind them was completely covered in black mold. I guess nobody noticed, like everything else in this department that I've been ranting about for years. Second, while they touted a safe and secure jail going forward, the new commissioner, Mike Sposato, upon his return, immediately implemented a redeployment schedule that takes gang investigators, criminal investigators, medical investigators, human resources personnel, medical personnel, rehab personnel, away from performing their integral duties to work security posts in other areas for such things as meal reliefs, church services, etc., because there just is not enough staff to perform these duties, while leaving their important work neglected on a daily basis. We currently have a major Fair Labor Standards Act lawsuit pending against the county due to Mike Sposato's failure to process payroll for our members during his tenure as sheriff. It's an ongoing lawsuit. Now his redeployment schedule once again takes HR personnel away from doing their jobs, once again exposing this department and the county to further FLSA violations and liability. Additionally, a series of cuts were implemented in our security areas upon his return that not only created risk for officers and inmates, but also put the department at risk of liability, all in the name of saving on overtime because they refused to properly hire. Cuts that this union fought daily to have rescinded, only to have new cuts announced every few days over the past few weeks. We've been playing a game of cat and mouse with Sposato over his managed by 1,000 cuts agenda. Cutting is not managing. We also have blatant violations of our contract with regard to manipulating job posting assignments outside our strict seniority clauses in the contract. Then we have allegations that our ranking officers, who are union members, are being used in an administrative capacity in an effort to divide this membership from within. I don't know where we're going. I'm sure you'll hear about promotions that were recently made in defense of what I'm complaining about here today. What's Sullivan bitching about again? We just made promotions, including him. This is true. But let's be clear here. I have been at this podium and in numerous other forums over the past 5 years demanding promotions in this department as we saw them being done in the PD, the deputies, etc. We lost over 40 supervisors in this department over the past 4 to 5 years who were not replaced. I've been here numerous times talking about that. These recent promotions were no gift. They simply and finally replenished our supervisory ranks after a 4-year-long fight to do so, alleviating this department's liability of not having the proper amount of supervisors in rank. Where do we go from here? What's the game plan from this department? As for us with Mike Sposato, I think it's pretty obvious we want him out. We want and deserve leadership in this department that wants to move ahead with care and professionalism and proper resources. How do we stand here with a police department that has a leader like Pat Ryder, whose department runs like clockwork, is nationally respected, while the needs of this department and its workforce are ignored, disrespected, and treated with contempt year after year? At the beginning of this speech, I spoke about Laura Curran firing Mike Sposato upon her election as county executive. She actually fired him during her election night acceptance speech, which is something I've never seen before. At that time, he needed a year and a half to reach his pension. I partially blame her for the mess that we're in now. She could have demoted him to some other position, allowed him to get his time, after which he'd be retired now, but that knee-jerk reaction left him lingering around, and now he's back and stuck in our craw again. If you'll allow me a couple of seconds here, I've spoken here numerous times about bail reform, about HALT, how HALT is bail reform in jail. Some stats that I have. Bear with me for a second, make sure I have all my information here. In 2018, before bail reform, when we had 1,100 inmates in this jail, we had 191 uses of force in our jail. We call it a use of force. Maybe the average, the public doesn't understand what that means. It's when staff is forced to use force against an inmate to stop them from committing a violent act in jail. 191 in 2018 with 1,100 inmates. 2022 to present, after bail reform, after HALT, we have about 750 inmates in the jail. Up to this year right now, we have 228 uses of force. Violence is up in our jails. Violence is up. Injury stats for officers and inmates back in 2018, with 1,100 inmates here, we had 214 injuries to staff. Right now, 2022, with 750 inmates, we're approaching 200. You could just, I'm not the mathematician here, it's obvious that the numbers are skewed. When it comes to inmate injuries, in 2018, again, 1,100 inmates, we had 1,099 injuries to inmates. That number, of course, it attaches all manner of injuries, catching your finger in a gate to being assaulted. 2022, with 750 inmates, we have 1,198, with 32% reduction in the inmates in our facility. I have to sue. Going back, it's not the fault of anybody here now, but just to show you what's going on in this department over the years. I've talked about roofs, infrastructure, everything else. I'm in an arbitration. I have to sue to get the roofs fixed because I can't get the roofs fixed. I'm at an arbitration. It's incredible what goes on here. I have to sue to get the department, and it goes back to the last administration, and it continues now, to have a workplace violence assessment done in our facility that includes inmates, includes officers and inmates. Hasn't been done in several years. I have to sue to get that done. All of this going on, and apparently Mike Sposato is the answer to fix this department. I have a constituency, as does everybody on this panel. In many regards, we have the same constituency. We need your help, attention, and participation. Mike Sposato, as sheriff, oversaw the greatest decline in the history of this department. Now this nuisance of a department is at a crossroads. Staffing, infrastructure, HALT, you name it. When you see what goes on with the police department in this county, and then the way the sheriff's department is treated in comparison, it's a sin what goes on. What is the game plan? Mike Sposato is not the answer. Slashing security is not the answer. Deliberate violation of our contract cannot and will not be tolerated. Bad labor relations will not be tolerated. We will be here, we'll be in the street, we'll be in the community, in the courts, and in the news, holding this county and department accountable for everything related to Mike Sposato, just like we did before when he was here, if he is permitted to continue his reign of destruction over this department. So there. Thank you for your time. I'll take any questions.
Brian, you've been coming to us for years, and you've been strong on advocating for membership, and what you've been telling us each and every time has been borne out by the facts. So you have with us a tremendous amount of credibility, and we would like to follow up on many of the points that you're making today, and would like a copy of your remarks. I'm just speaking to Legislative Ford, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee, that perhaps a hearing dedicated to these issues would be something that would be worthwhile.
That's a great start.
But again, you have tremendous credibility because when you represented things to us, they've been borne out as factual. So it is very troubling. We have the utmost respect for your members. We understand that you're in an incredibly difficult position. That your members are in a difficult position, that your profession leads to shorter lifespans. It's a very difficult job, and we have to make sure that we are doing everything we can to support you and to make sure that you're doing it as effectively as you have been. So we would like to follow up on the points that you made, and again, we'll figure out the
I'll submit a copy, and a hearing would be great.
Thank you very much. Brian, you have never been shy about fighting for the people that work on that work at the jail, and you've always made it. I'm sorry, I'm gonna lose my voice. You've always been a great advocate, and we will have a hearing because I'm rather concerned over the fact that the roof still isn't fixed. I mean, it was. Thank you. It was probably like 19 years ago when I first visited the jail, and we had a problem with the roof. And it wasn't just, I think just a couple of years ago, right? So we were there, we went on a tour, they laid out the whole game plan, how they were gonna fix the roof, how much it was gonna cost, blah, 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 the whole bit. And I think many of us that have, especially have toured the jail and do support you in your offices, are very dismayed over the fact that we're still talking about the roof, okay? And I know that that is one of the, there's a lot of other problems, but I know that the roof is very key in protecting a lot of everything that's underneath it. And it's just a failure on the part of these administrations that just don't pay attention and don't act. You act, it's about time that they start following your lead and answering and listening.
I can't stress enough, it's the staffing. Everything here revolves around staffing and replacing people that are going. That's the main thing. Yes, the roof, 100%. It's a perfect glaring example. Everything comes down to staffing.
And you know what, and you highlight even the fact with staffing, because you know, as you know, I have family members that do work there. So I'm aware of like when people are forced into overtime. You know, it's not like everybody thinks, oh, you're gonna make extra money. It isn't always welcomed. A lot of people are sacrificing. They may have to work, they thought they were gonna have off Thanksgiving, now they have to work Thanksgiving. They may have something they have to do, no, they have to stay over. They're compelled, they are forced to be there. And a lot of times too, it's not very good for their health.
And I can't reiterate enough that at this point in time, after all of this stuff and all of these things that we've done and tried to do, to hit the reset button and put back the one person that my entire membership blames for destroying this department, and hit the reset button, and we're going to start from there. It's a real kick in the teeth. It really is.
I understand your frustration, so to share it with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First, I want to say, just in response to Legislator Ford, that the roof replacement and roof work is actually in the capital plan. And it's highlighted. So we're urging our colleagues, but I know, Brian, you've heard this before.
It's been a capital plan for several years.
So obviously we're going to continue not just to push to get through the capital plan, but push it through the contract and the RFP and whatever else needs to get done. That process is important and integral because you've been here before. But to talk a little bit more about some of the other points that you made, and obviously the infrastructure of the building is extremely important. It seems to be, by representation by everyone that's here today, that's on your board, that there's a very important issue that hasn't been discussed, at least so far. And that's the relationship that the union has with Mrs. Sposato. I mean, I don't understand how he plans to lead the facility if your delegation feels this way. I mean, your comments, not to mix words, are very strong. And obviously, I mean, some of my colleagues up here had the opportunity to work with Mr. Sposato over the years, and some of the things as pertains to the armor contract, we disagreed heavily with him, that he recommended, among other things. And I think when we do have the hearing, Madam Chair, Ford, is that's a very pointed question. It may seem arbitrary in the sense that, well, people work with people all the time, that they're not able to that they don't have the confidence in. But this is very damning. And from our standpoint, we feel that the administration will have an opportunity to rectify it, if not with some level of oversight, but potentially naming someone, not him. But from that standpoint, I think that question has to get addressed. I don't think in my history here I've seen an entire delegation from a particular collective bargaining unit completely dismiss the current commissioner of the department that they report to. I don't think I've seen it. And I think that should not go unnoticed, because I think from that standpoint, it speaks volumes. It's not just Brian Sullivan here and a few of the key members of the union, of the collective bargaining unit. It's this entire delegation, from top to bottom. And from that standpoint, I think the Commissioner Sposato is going to have a really difficult time leading the jail if he doesn't have the confidence of the membership of your union. So we're going to closely, obviously, watch that, and I look forward to the date of when the hearing is actually scheduled. And as I said before, we envision that the capital plan, I know it's on the calendar today, but it's going to probably be called and then recessed, but we plan to envision doing it next month. Not just calling for the infrastructure work to be done, but also, more importantly, making sure it gets through the contract and the RFP process as well. But Sully, as always, and I think I agree with the comments that were made by the presiding officer, you've always demonstrated when you came here to be someone that would sound the alarm, and we are appreciative of that. And you've always been someone that we can see as a straight shooter, even though some of the stuff is sometimes our fault, something that we don't act on as quickly as possible. So we always appreciate your straightforwardness and your honesty. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Just to talk about the Armour stuff, it's kind of, if it wasn't said, it's funny that Armour Correctional is not allowed to practice in New York State, to my knowledge. But the person that brought him in here is back.
Let's individuate.
Actually, Minority Leader Abrams mentioned it, but the roof is in the capital plan, and for what it's worth, it's highlighted, which means it's a priority. So we are going to really focus on it. And I think you have all of our support up here, because obviously if there's something wrong with the roof, you're going to have issues with mold and everything else, so it has to be addressed. You know, I know morale is a tough and important subject with all of you, especially after COVID and everything else you've dealt with. And I kind of feel bad. It looks like you kind of are the poster child for people that have low morale right now. But
750 officers and over 600 cases of COVID, and now this is what we're dealing with.
know that we really do appreciate everything you do, and I know just walking through those doors into that facility, it's a very strange feeling when you're inside there, and you all spend so much of your life in there, and it's we respect you, but we want to show it by giving you better work atmosphere, and your words don't go unheard. I was actually stunned when I heard of that reappointment. I couldn't believe it, but I'm hoping, I don't know how much time he has left, but let's hope his time is almost done, and hopefully maybe they could think about putting him somewhere else if that's the consideration, but that's for other people to decide, but that would be my recommendation.
Mine too.
Okay, anyone else? All right, thank you again.
Thank you for your time. Back on to happy stuff. Thank you.